Viewers be advised. Today's episode contains themes of death and loss and may not be appropriate for all audiences.
It wasn't me that failed. And it took a really long time for me to come to terms with that. And, a lot of talking with therapists and talking with other women who had gone through this.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Reesa and I'm your host. We are talking to real families about real stories here on The Real Family Eats, where we've got food for thought and thoughtful food. So let's eat. Hey everyone, so my guest today is Jillian. Jillian, thank you so much for being willing to chat with us today. I'm so excited to hear about your story and for the recipe, so thank you for being on our show today.
Yeah, no problem, Reesa. It's great to be here with you guys today.
Wonderful. So for those that don't know you like I know you, can you introduce yourself for me and kind of a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Jillian. I currently live in Florida, so it's nice and toasty here. I'm a mom of one living child, and I work at the happiest place on earth. So
Very cool. Okay. And so I know you're going to introduce a recipe to us, one that I don't think I've ever made. So I'd love to know what the recipe is. Tell us why you chose this recipe today.
yeah, it's called Korean beef. We just call it Asian beef in our house. We actually don't even
Okay.
make it with beef. You can use any ground meat substitute if you prefer no meat in your house. It's pretty versatile. I chose this because it's a super easy weeknight meal. You don't have a lot of time. You got some ground meat that's dying in your fridge and you got to use it up. And your kids are hungry. This is great, super quick. Most kids will eat rice and meat. And we usually add a couple pot stickers on the side. If you have them in the freezer, you throw those in a steamer and they're good to go. My kid loves this meal. And it's been one of our go-tos since me and my spouse started dating. And after, we got married, it's a weekly meal that I make.
Very cool. And so where did you find this recipe?
I found it online. I just searched Korean beef and this one popped up. It was a great one. If you're counting calories, I think it's technically paleo and keto and a whole bunch of other things if you modify it a little bit. But we can add the website in later. But I grew up eating tons of different cultural foods. And so I was craving Asian food one night and I was like, we got some ground beef in the fridge. Let's see if we can use that up.
Wonderful. And yes, we will absolutely have the link to the recipe that Jillian has shared with us in our show notes. So you can definitely check it out there. Okay, so talk me through. I think I've got all the ingredients. What am I starting with today?
You start with a little bit of either sesame oil or any oil, honestly, that you have on hand in your pan. And you're just going to start that warming up. You don't want to get it too hot. I usually do it about on a medium. I measure approximate amounts.
Love it.
I do a lot of measuring with my heart, not a whole lot of measuring based off of measurements.
I feel that very much so. It feels like it's good.
Right? It feels like this is the correct amount. Let's go with that.
Yes. And sometimes, that's the real life story, right? When you've got kiddos and they're running amok, sometimes it's like you don't have time to grab all of the exact measurements. You're just going to oh yeah, let me just throw that in there.
Exactly. I usually do about a turn and a half of whatever oil I have on hand. I always have sesame oil just because we eat a lot of Asian inspired foods here at our house. So I always have that on hand. So I'm going to start mine warming up at about like a medium, almost a medium high.
Gotcha.
And then we'll add in our garlic, which you measure with your heart for sure. It
Yes.
says, I think 3 cloves.
Mm-hmm.
That is never enough of garlic. It's always going to be more in my life.
Absolutely. You know what's so funny is especially my oldest from a very young age is always like, Mama puts garlic in everything I love. And that's just his way of life. So I feel ya.
Yeah. So I
Okay,
usually put my garlic in as everything is starting to heat up. And then once it starts to sizzle, I know that my pan is hot enough to put my meat in.
okay,
But that's just how
perfect.
I do it.
Alrighty. So I'll get this going. And while this is cooking, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story. You were sharing with me that you had a little bit of a different experience with pregnancy and kind of your journey there. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, traditionally in media and Hallmark movies, people get pregnant and then magical time happens and it's all a great picture perfect pregnancy and nothing goes wrong and they look so beautiful and they have perfect hair and skin and everything goes great. That was definitely not my experience with anything.
Wow. Okay.
I unfortunately did have a miscarriage as our first pregnancy, which just rocked our entire world to the core. I was trying to become sober at the time, which didn't help.
Did that challenge your sobriety? I imagine.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Challenged my sobriety. Thankfully, I was able to stay sober because my spouse is so rock solid. But we spent a lot of days just crying, and that is okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's a loss. That's a big old loss, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think what you just said there, that sometimes that's all you can do is just sit there and mourn that loss. And
exactly.
But it doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And so, when we did get pregnant the second time, we were so excited and so just joyful. And then the issue started about 6 weeks after we found out we were pregnant. So we were probably about 9 to 10 weeks along. I started bleeding, which of course is not what anyone wants to have after they've had a miscarriage. And so I, of course, immediately went to the doctor and I was like, what's going on? And they were like, let's take, ultrasound, some tests. You may be having a miscarriage. It's, it's still pretty early in your pregnancy. And that's when they officially diagnosed me with what's called a bicornuate uterus. So basically, I have two cervixes that meet down to one or two uteruses, like two halves of a uterus that meet down to one cervix.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the two halves of the uterus weren't talking to each other. So it looks kind of like a heart-shaped balloon almost.
Okay.
And the two halves weren't talking to each other. So the one half that didn't have our embryo in it decided that it was time to have a period.
Gotcha.
And the other side was like, no, there's an embryo in here. Stop.
Yeah, we're doing something in here.
Pregnant. And so my body, for the entire pregnancy, almost every 4 weeks, decided it was time to bleed.
Really? Goodness.
Which, of course, no woman wants to see. You're not supposed to get a period while you're pregnant. It's one of the perks that come along with pregnancy is you don't have to deal with that.
Yeah. Did you, now having gone through your miscarriage, and even though the doctor's telling you, hey, this is what's happening, every 4 weeks when you're getting that bleeding, what was going on through your brain? I'd love to kind of
your anxiety immediately goes through the roof and all rational thought leaves. And you stop everything you're doing and go to the doctor. and they think you're crazy because you're in there all the time. But you just have to say, for my mental health, this is what I need. And thankfully I had a super awesome doctor who, even though he thought I was crazy for wanting to be in there all the time and getting numerous ultrasounds and paying way more than you probably should during a pregnancy, I was like, this is what I need for my mental health. I need to make sure that that heartbeat is still there.
How did you, so I feel like so many parents that I talk to, you know, there's that apprehension, that fear to kind of advocate for yourself, especially in a doctor's office, because it can be really intimidating, really scary, you know, and if they're telling you, oh, this is not necessary, you know, there can be a real propensity to kind of, okay, well, I guess I just have to like quiet this anxiety. Like, I'm so curious about what kind of shifted for you that you were like, no, like I am 100% advocating for myself, because that is so amazingly awesome.
I had an amazing medical team who, even though they kept saying, you know, for your type of uterus, this is unfortunately normal. I said, I don't care if this is normal. It doesn't feel normal to me.
Yes.
And from what I've seen in society and from what I've seen in movies and from what everything I'm reading online, this shouldn't be happening. And I don't care that I'm a special case. I want to be treated as though this is not normal. And so they just kind of had to listen to, I can understand that, yes, this is normal for me, but my brain can't comprehend this.
Yeah.
Because I, one, can't trust my body because it failed the first time we tried this. So there is a lack of trust between my brain and my body to be able to do the right thing. And there is a lack of trust between my brain and itself to know that this is normal for me. So I just need to be able to visually see that there is a heartbeat on that monitor until this happens again and all rational thought leaves my brain.
Yeah. I heard you mention in there kind of the feeling that my body has failed me. Would you be willing to talk a little bit more about that and that narrative that was going on for you?
Oh yeah. I mean, being part of the 1 in 4 club, which is not a club that any woman should ever have to be a part of. You know, 1 in 4 women will go through a miscarriage in their life. It breaks all trust between your brain and your body. Of how can I trust my body to be able to do what it is supposed to be able to do based off of science and thousands of years of women giving birth to babies. That why can't mine do that? Like, what is wrong with me, and why did my body fail at something that comes so naturally to so many other women? And I had to remind myself that, you know, I'm not broken. My body is not broken. This one just didn't work out. It's like any job or any, you know, pair of shoes or dress. Like, this one just didn't fit for me. It didn't work for me this one time. I didn't do anything wrong. I did not fail. My body did not inherently fail. This just didn't work out. And it could have been something with the embryo, or, you know, something that happened in the pregnancy itself that we don't know. But
it wasn't me that failed. And it took a really long time for me to come to terms with that. And, a lot of talking with therapists and talking with other women who had gone through this, and inherently being like, you weren't the one that failed. The pregnancy itself failed.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, as far as kind of it sounds like the work that you had to do and the initiative to go and do that work to be able to kind of tease out that narrative, because you're so right. And I've heard that from so many folks of like, this is not what it's supposed to be, right? This isn't what you're advertised when people talk about having kids, and that this is your body. You should like that word, right? So many times gets used of like what it should look like, what it should be doing, what it should be capable. And that, this equation almost, that if it can't do it, then it somehow is a dysfunction on your end, that you're somehow less than. And
Yeah.
And gosh, to hear kind of that you were able to tease out that narrative is huge, because I know there's so many other mothers out there that maybe are struggling to do just that.
Yeah, it's crazy how alone you can feel when you don't know that other people around you are going through the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You feel very alone when all of a sudden they're like, your pregnancy is no longer there. That heartbeat isn't there anymore, that it just stopped. And your world is shattered, and you feel completely alone, and you forget you have someone right there who's going through it with you, your spouse or your partner, mm-hmm. or your significant other. And also that if you count 4 women, one of those women have also gone through it.
Wow.
Statistically speaking. So it's like,
yeah.
But society has put such a stigma on talking about miscarriages and pregnancy loss and infertility and all these other things, that it's like, you don't feel like you can talk about it because we're not supposed to. It's not the pretty part of pregnancy that everyone wants to hear about. We want to hear about the baby showers and the pretty things of your hair's growing and your cute belly and the cute dresses and the getting ready for the baby. And it's like, no, I want to hear about the ugly parts of your pregnancy, because I had an ugly pregnancy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made a great point, and I do want to make sure to like take a moment and highlight that, you had a partner that was also experiencing that. I know I just mentioned kind of moms out there, that also very much can affect the partner as well, male partners included. Yeah. I do want to take a moment to mention that, because sometimes there can be some of those feelings as well that are hidden, right? That if for whatever reason there are fertility issues, that can also impact just as much. And there's a very real story there for the partner as well. And so I just wanted to, I thank you for mentioning that, because you're so right.
Oh yeah. Because, everyone views male presenting partners as the strong, dominant household, head of household, and mm-hmm. they don't give them space to grieve, because dads lose babies too.
Absolutely.
And no one talks about that. It's always, mm-hmm. oh, but the mom was carrying the pregnancy. Yes, my body carried a pregnancy, but his heart was just as full of love and excitement as mine was. Mm-hmm. And it's hurting just as much, if not more, because not only does he hurt, he has to watch his partner hurt and go through that same amount of hurt that he's feeling, and he can do nothing to help it. And also, female presenting partners who, mm-hmm. may have contributed to their spouse's pregnancy, they hurt just as much as well.
Yeah. And I think what you mentioned there is, it's for everybody. There's some sort of hurt. It may look different. It may present differently. Because that's another piece that, for some, it may present in those tears and that crying. For others, it may present in anger and in disconnect and like a shutdown almost.
Yeah.
And so kind of having that space, having that compassion for not only the caring partner, but for the non-caring partner as well. That those are very real things that, as you mentioned, don't get talked about enough, because there is this facade, right, that I feel like has been handed down generation after generation of, this is what we need to survive. We've got to paint this picture that this is amazing so that people want to do it.
Exactly. Like, I almost feel duped into becoming pregnant, because it's like, it's so perfect. It's anything but. It is an ugly, gross experience, and no one tells you the ugly, gross parts.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so curious, like, from that, did it threaten your relationship with your non-caring partner?
No, because I really needed them, in the sense that if they had not been here, I would have turned to alcohol again, and I probably would not be alive today. And so
Wow.
It was very much I need you to be here to stop me from going out to the liquor store. I need you to be here to help me remember to shower. I need you to remind me that I'm still a human and I deserve a bath. I need you to help me to remember to eat, because my grief was so overcompassing that self-care went out the window. And so without my partner, go ahead.
No, go for it. I want to hear more.
Yeah, without my partner, his name's Tony. Without Tony, it really would have been just me slowly killing myself with a bottle. And I relied so much on him and his strength, and I had no family in town besides what I call my Florida family, who I love so much. They are not related by blood or paperwork in any way, shape, or form, but they're amazing people. And I grew up with them in Minnesota, which is where I'm from. And I love them dearly. And so it was very much if I wasn't around them, I was around Tony, and he was really my only family here in Florida that I could talk to you about how I was feeling, or, what was going on that day, or, everything that I was thinking or not thinking.
Yeah. Okay. Pause for just a moment. I've got my ground meat and it's nice and brown. What do I do next?
Yeah. So now you can start adding in all of your soy sauce, molasses mixture, all of that. Get that in there. Start bubbling that up.
Okay.
Mine's still browning, so mine takes a little bit longer.
Perfect. So I'll keep mixing. I wanted to take a moment and ask you, because you said something that I think is super powerful in what you just mentioned, that I wanted to circle back to, and that's just the phrase that I deserve a bath. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. When I was going through the thick of it, of, the worst parts of the depression and, emotions that followed the miscarriage, I didn't feel like I deserved to live, which, is a scary thought. I didn't feel like I deserved the basic human necessities of food, or, a bath, which lots of people think is like a luxury. Like, we all shower and we all, wash ourselves, but to sit down and have like a bubble bath with a glass of sparkling whatever and a book or watch a movie on a device and just soak in a bathtub. I was like, I don't want that, and nor do I feel like I deserve that, because how could someone who failed, again, it all circles back to me having to deal with the fact that I felt I failed at something that is so ingrained in our society that every woman should be able to do this, that if I failed at this, why should I deserve something that everybody should be able to have? And so he had to remind me that no, you're also human. You deserve to eat ice cream for dinner. You deserve to make those goofy choices that you want to make. You want to take a bubble bath, okay, you deserve to take a bath. And I think we punish ourselves when we intrinsically fail at something that should come so naturally to us. We go down the road of punishment because we don't know how to forgive ourselves as human beings. And there is that sense of, I have to be able to forgive myself. And it took a lot of bubble baths. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It took a lot of bubble baths. But we got there eventually. There are still days that, you have to remember that, I'm still human. We still make mistakes.
Absolutely. And what I really appreciate, and why I'm so thankful that you were willing to even talk a little bit more about that, is because you're so absolutely right. I've heard that so many times, kind of this idea of that your brain can be really good at convincing you of some of these narratives, like you're saying, that hey, I deserve this punishment. This is, I don't get to have this luxury, like you said, of a bath. Like that's for people who didn't fail. And to kind of have even just that thing that so many people do take for granted. I don't know that people would look at a bath and go like, oh, this is something that my brain might try to convince me I'm not deserving of. But it is, gosh, when you're in it, like you said, and those are the thoughts that are going on, it can be very, very difficult to remind yourself otherwise.
Oh, yeah. Real quick pause. If you haven't already, start your rice in your rice cooker or Instapot.
Yes.
I always measure mine with my knuckles or fingers. But
we absolutely do the finger measure. I mean, granted, that's how I was taught by my Filipino family, so that's what we do.
Yeah.
Yes, I have my rice. That one I made sure was in there cooking.
Nice.
Thank you for the reminder.
But yeah, so
yeah,
we did that. But yeah, back to ugly pregnancies, because it didn't just stop with the bleeding.
Okay.
And the mental health part of that, it continued to get ugly as we got to the physical pregnancy part of,
okay,
you make a birth plan, and your medical team tries to follow it as closely as possible. Well, we got closer to our pregnancy deadline, and they were like, he's breech, and it is not safe for us to turn him.
Okay.
So C-section it is. Cool. Wasn't on my birth plan.
Yeah. Did that feel scary? Like that news, like when they came in and they told you that, I just can only imagine all the thoughts that are happening in that moment.
It was definitely scary. It was something that we had talked about as a possibility, because thankfully my birth team had said, hey, with your uterus, this, and this could end up being a possibility. We had talked about it. Was it our first choice? No. Nobody's first choice is to, get cut open and have a huge scar for the rest of their life. But so was it scary? Yes. Were we completely blindsided? No. We had
Gotcha,
talked
okay.
about it and said, you know, if it is the case that we do need a C-section, then with some other medical stuff both I and my spouse are dealing with, we should probably just tie my tubes at the same time, because after this crazy pregnancy of bleeding all the time, I do not want to birth another human being. No, thank you.
Was that a difficult decision to come to?
Huh?
Was that a difficult decision to come to?
Not super hard to come to. I'm adopted, and so for me, adoption was never out of the picture. It's who better to adopt a child than an adopted child.
Yeah.
I'm always down to adopt 5 million children. You know, I'd love to have a couple more kids running around if the cards work out and, you know, everything goes perfectly. I'd like maybe 1 or 2 more running around, but you know, it's not cheap, and I know that.
Absolutely.
And it's, you know, it's not always in the cards for people either. But so it was something of both with some medical stuff for me, some medical stuff for my spouse. We were like, let's just have 1 pregnancy. That makes it, and that would be great.
Okay.
So, you know, that was news for us. And then right after Hurricane Ian down here in Florida, I started feeling gross the next morning. We had no power at our house. We were at my Florida family's house for the day. And I was like, I don't feel great. And I have not felt this baby kick in a while.
Wow.
We should probably go to the hospital. And they were like, okay, let's go. So we went, and they were like, yeah, you're actually having contractions. You're only like 2 weeks out from your due date, so we're probably just gonna take him today. We were like, oh,
surprise.
2 weeks earlier than we were expecting. Cool.
Yeah.
We have no power at our house right now.
Awesome. Oh my goodness.
We love this.
Yeah.
And we had already decided on his name, Ian, way ahead of this hurricane that was named Ian.
Oh
and
my
so
goodness, I didn't even draw the connection.
Yep. So we were like, great, this is awesome. And they're like, so when was the last time you ate? And we were like, well, we ate breakfast like 2 hours ago. And they're like, okay, we have to wait about 6 hours. And I was like, you're kidding.
Ooh. Yeah.
So now we have this anxiety where we're calling people, letting them know, like, hey, can you check on the house? Can you check on the freezer? Make sure nothing's dripping. Like, trying to coordinate someone making sure that we end up with power eventually in our house. Thankfully, our dog was with our Florida family. Like, nothing's going the way I want it to. We weren't expecting our baby to come today. We get into the OR, and they start the procedure, and all of a sudden I hear the surgeon say, get somebody else in here. And my heart dropped.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, what's going on? Like, my dad has a biomedical engineering degree. My grandfather was a colon and rectal surgeon. I've been around enough medical stuff to know that when the surgeon calls in an extra pair of hands, it's never a good reason. And they're like, he's stuck in your incision. His head is stuck inside your body.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, great. So awesome. So I find out later from my spouse that the doctor is literally 1 leg up on the table trying to pull my child out of my incision.
Oh my goodness.
And thankfully, they finally get him out. And all of a sudden, my baby is whisked away. Not chest to chest like we had talked about. And my spouse leaves my side. I am stuck prone on my back I can't turn my head. Like, I can't see anything behind me. And I am literally screaming, what is going on? I find out from the anesthesiologist.
Left alone.
Yeah. I'm completely left alone with my anesthesiologist, and the surgeons basically told nothing. There's like noises coming from the other side of the curtain. You know, I can't hear anything behind me. I'm also half deaf. So that doesn't help anything that I can't hear anything going on. But I find out later, Ian he was a nuchal cord times 3. So his umbilical cord was wrapped 3 times around his neck and he was not breathing.
Wow.
So not only did we have this crazy pregnancy, our birth has now had nothing the way we want it to. My kid isn't breathing and no one's telling me anything. What's going on?
So incredibly scary.
They finally get him breathing. They get the little CPAP on him. He's not taking good breaths. I don't get him on me for the next, 15 minutes. It feels like eternity, of course. And so finally they bring him over and, you're crying and, you see your baby for the first time and it's the best thing ever. But it's just such a horror show leading up to that moment that nobody talks about.
Yeah.
All we see are those pretty pregnancies that go perfect to plan. I had 2 pushes and they were out and it was perfect. And then we cut the cord and I immediately started breastfeeding and it was great. Yeah, it's not always great. And I feel that those stories also need to be told because you feel so alone when you're talking about pregnancies in those mom groups and you're like, I had a horrible one. Sorry to tell everybody, but it wasn't great.
Yeah. And I think, again, this isn't necessarily right to scare someone.
Oh, no,
rather
not at
to
all.
just normalize, like, these things happen probably more than you think they do. And like you said, it can feel so incredibly isolating and lonely to kind of feel like you're sticking out in that way, but not in a way that like you got to choose to stick out for.
Exactly. And yeah, this is not to scare anybody, like, don't get pregnant. No, if you want kids in your family, by all means, and you're able to, by all means, get pregnant and have babies. But, there are those families that are struggling or, didn't have pretty pregnancies and they feel like they can't talk about them because everybody else around them just had the pretty perfect birth plan, home water birth, whatever they chose to do. And it was exactly how they wanted. And I love that for them. And I'm so glad everything went perfect for them. That just wasn't my experience. And it's not to say it was a bad experience. I got a really great human out of this. And, I learned a lot and I learned just how strong I am through all of this. Would I ever want to repeat it for myself? No. Never again. No, thank you.
Yeah. Do you feel like, because I just heard you mention in there, like you were able to see kind of the strength that your body was capable of, did that shift or help shift some of that narrative from that failing, the feeling of failure, to look at what I did?
Yeah, because, I ended up having a super awesome human and being able to say, I did it. I did grow a human and I was able to bring life into this world, even if it wasn't perfect. And that did help with some of the narrative of I failed because I didn't fail this time, and he ended up being really awesome. So
absolutely. So I'm curious because I know you mentioned a couple of times your Florida family, and it sounds like you had that ability to have a kind of a support system around you. Were there things that, looking back on it, your support people were able to do or were able to provide that, if a support person is listening right now, that was really helpful for you in being able to kind of navigate this journey, that, give them some insight, give them some tips of something that maybe worked out for you or was really appreciated by you?
Yeah. One, don't show up empty-handed. If you're going to go visit either a new mom or someone who's pregnant, either bring something to do, whether it be a board game or something to take their mind off of it, even if you're visiting someone who's recently had, a loss or is going through a rough time and you want to be that support person, bring something to do to get their mind off it, or that they can talk to you while doing something else, or a meal. That's always super helpful if you're going to be that support person, whether it's a loss or a new human being. But also, don't expect to hold the baby. Go with the mindset of a giver's mindset of, there's a pile of laundry on the floor. Does this need to be put in the laundry, or does it need to be put away? Can I do that? Because not every parent is going to want to separate from their child right away, but they would have to separate from their child in order to put that laundry in. And I think those were the things that were more helpful of when people would come over and bring a meal and then, hey, where's your vacuum? Can I vacuum something real quick for you while we visit and talk? Or, I didn't have the brain capacity after birthing my human to even say, yeah, could you do X, Y, and Z? Or, hey, could you bring me this? Hey, I really need this. And so it was so helpful when people just showed up with caffeine and then just said, I've noticed this needs to get done. Where is the tool to do that?
Yeah,
not
so almost the initiative too.
Yeah, not how do I do that, but where are the tools? And that's a lot easier for some people to just say, oh, that's over there. Or they might say, oh, don't worry about it. Yeah, don't believe them. Just do it anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a great point. Oftentimes, and I totally can appreciate they're coming from, right, that place of, this is a brand new human. I'd love to meet them and I'd love to spend time with them. And sometimes we forget that parents or parent, right, is also just meeting this person on the outside, which looks very different than, for the caring partner to kind of have it internally. And so these are also, they're just getting to know this person that they are now being, entrusted to raise and to grow. And so there's a lot of bonding that they're also needing and wanting to do as well. So as much as your heart wants to also pick up that little baby, unless you're kind of asked and said, can you please take this child? I need to go use the restroom, that it may very well be that, like you said, kind of coming in and supporting the household may be the best help that someone can provide.
Oh yeah. That was some of the best things that were given to us, were the days when people would come over and say, hey, I noticed that this hasn't gotten done. Let me do those real quick. And then we can sit and chat. And those are those moments then when I was like, can you hold my baby while I do something else? And because they had already helped me with one way, I was much more willing to then entrust them with my new human as well and be like, I really need to use the bathroom, or, I need to shower. I need to, take a walk outside. Can you just watch my human so they don't die? Thanks.
Absolutely. So true. I'm so curious, like, if you could kind of go back in time, is there anything that you might tell yourself in order to prepare as best you can for kind of that journey, or anything that you would offer to anyone else who might be walking a similar looking journey?
I think that, one, it is okay to cry. They are just extras. It's not sadness. It's not happiness. It's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just extras. It's just your body's way of a release. And people so often see crying as a bad thing, or it's not strong, or it's not, insert taboo subject here. They're just extras. My mom would say that all the time of, it's okay to cry. They're just extras.
Mm.
And because so many times it was just, I'm in the grocery store. I'm not allowed to cry about this. Cry in the bread aisle. Just do it.
Yeah.
You don't know these people. They're not going to see you again. Cry in the cheese. No one cares.
Absolutely.
But also that, there's always someone who is going through the same stuff. It may not look exactly the same, and they may not show it the same way, but there is always someone out there who has either gone through it or is going through it or will go through it. And you can choose to find those people, or you could choose to be that person for the next person. It just depends on, do you want to find the people to help you, or do you just want to be alone? And I think if I had known that ahead of time, it would have been easier to go out and search for people who had gone through similar situations.
And I think you make such a great point that sometimes there is that fear, whether it's a narrative in your head as far as if you ask for support, if you go and you seek that out, that it means something about you even more, kind of like we talked about, kind of that idea of failure or weakness or whatnot. And you're absolutely right that there are those barriers for a lot of people to be able to reach out that hand and ask for that help and state what their needs are, because there's so much of this conditioning that when we state our needs, we're acting selfishly, right? We're, oh, you're all about what you need. Well, what about the rest of the world? It's like, goodness gracious. Like, I think that there's enough for everybody's needs, like really core needs, to be met. It's that willingness, it's that compassion and that grace to be able to extend that and leave space for people that are asking for support, because it does take a lot of gumption to be able to say, actually, I do need help.
Yeah. And that is not a weakness. It is a strength. It takes a very strong human to realize, hey, I can't do this all on my own. I do need help. I think it almost takes a stronger person to realize that than it does for someone who just tries to power through on their own.
Were there any resources or support services that you found that were really helpful to you that maybe other people don't know about?
I mean, I used a bunch of different mom apps, but one, I think it was Baby List or Baby Center. I honestly don't remember the name, but it was one that there were different like mom chat groups, and you could search by different like issues. And so I just one day typed in bicornuate uterus, and a whole group of people who had bicornuate uteruses popped up, and we were able to just chat about issues we had together. And that was amazing. I was like, I of course have deleted all my pregnancy apps because I don't plan on ever doing that again, and I don't need them anymore. But I think it was either like Baby Center or Baby List or one of those mom tracking pregnancy things that you can like get on a chat group or whatever. So don't be afraid to search different apps or, groups, or even just online and say, bicornuate or whatever your issue is or what your needs are, support group. You never know what's going to come up. I thankfully through Disney, they have a really great system of support for like if you need to just talk to somebody, there's a number we can call. So I don't know if there's like a national number that people can call. I know that there's like the suicide prevention hotline. We called that on occasion.
Yes.
Sometimes you just need to talk to somebody, and it's not because, you're suicidal. It might, you need someone to listen, and they do a really good job at that too. And so sometimes it's just, hey, I'm not thinking about suicide, but I definitely am not in a good place. And they can talk to you about that too.
And
So
I
that's
think
always
that's a
a
great
great,
point. Yeah.
yeah. And the crisis
Um,
hotlines, there's tons of different ones. There's ones for military families, there's ones for, suicide hotlines, there's ones for LGBTQ. There's,
mhm.
don't feel like you failed if you have to call those numbers, because you didn't fail. You're being super strong, and you're realizing that, you need to talk to somebody and you need that extra help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing those. We'll definitely, again, all of those resources will be in those show notes for anybody who maybe say, hey, this resonates with me, and I would like some of that support, because you're absolutely right. It's the more we can put that word out there, the more that we can normalize asking for help, seeking out support. Hopefully, I can reach
Oh,
and I've said it multiple times, that dream goal of being out of a job, right? Because everybody is out and thriving and being awesome. And
oh
so
yeah.
these are some of the ways, is asking for that support, learning the skills, learning, really unlearning maybe some of those ways of avoiding and not talking about these issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jillian, thank you so much. So I've got my ground meat, and we just put this on rice. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Yeah. I just do a
Perfect.
big old scoop of rice, and you just scoop it onto your rice however much you want. And
Okay. So I know that there were green onions. And do you normally mix it in or sprinkle it on top so that it kind of keeps its integrity? It doesn't get all, what do you do?
if we have them, which we don't always have them, sometimes I just use freeze-dried chives. Those work great. You can
Okay.
get those at Sam's Club or Costco.
Okay.
Honestly, a lot of this stuff can be substituted for other things as well. But yeah, so we just sprinkle them on top. That way they don't get all mixed in and whatnot. Um, but
Perfect.
I'm just finishing steaming my rice now.
Yeah. So how are we looking? How'd I do?
Oh, that looks beautiful. You did such a good job.
Thanks. I'm so excited to try this. And I know that Josh, my partner, was like, hey, make sure you make extra for dinner. So he's super excited to try it.
Right? It's such a good one, and we love it. The first time we tried it, Tony does not cook. Can't cook to save his life. Never has been able to.
We all have our strengths.
Right, we all have our strengths. His is definitely washing dishes. That was one of the rules when we started dating and then got engaged and married, is I will cook you every single meal if I never have to wash a single dish. And he was like, done. This sounds like a great plan.
Except.
And so he lovingly does all the dishes, and I love it because I never have to wash dishes.
Well,
but
I'm so glad
we
that
did this
he
for
has
one of the
been such a
first
support.
meals that I ever cooked for him, and he was just astounded. Like, it's such a good flavor and it just tastes so good. You can add a little gochujang if you're feeling a little spicy. You can zhuzh it up with some fish sauce if you want it a little more savory. Like, y'all can just go crazy with it depending on how you're feeling. If you don't like ginger, leave it out. If you're not a big fan of garlic, I don't know why, but you can also leave that out. Like, it's so versatile. You can't really mess it up. And if you don't have molasses, or you don't feel like getting molasses, you can use brown sugar if you have it, because brown sugar is actually just white sugar with molasses in it, and it does just about the same thing.
Very cool. Okay. I love it. And I love the versatility, because that helps, right? That helps with the parent life when you just don't have the time, because that's the theme, right? You don't have the time, and parenting is hard, and you're doing 50 million things at once.
Yeah. And this is definitely one that everybody loves to eat. We all love to eat this. Even Ian at 1.5 years old, he loves eating this one. He will ask on a regular basis when I ask him, what do you want for dinner? He goes, pot stickers, beef. And it's like, yep, you want pot stickers and beef? Okay, that sounds great, Buggy.
Love it. Well, thank you, Jillian, so much for being willing, one, to teach us this recipe, and two, to be willing to pull back that curtain and share your story and shine the light on these areas that, gosh, need more light and need more space and time, because they are real and they do exist. And they're incredibly scary and lonely when you're going through it and you feel all alone.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And thank you for being a guest on our show. And for everyone out there watching, again, remember, check out our show notes for any of those resources, and we'll see you next time. If you or anyone that you know is struggling with any of the topics that we discussed in today's episode, make sure to check out our show notes for support and resources. You can get help. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode of The Real Family Eats. If you're a parent ready to share your real-life parenting story, make sure to reach out to us in our website found in the show notes. And that goes for today's recipe, social medias, support, and resources. All of that can be found in our show notes. So make sure to check them out. And make sure to follow, like, share, subscribe, and stay up to date on all things The Real Family Eats. I hope you'll join us next time for more food for thought and thoughtful food. Enjoy your eats.